$190 new COVID-19 infections in the city, including 3 linked to a Taikushing fast food restaurant. Joe Biden says the U.S. is willing to use force to defend Taiwan. And Anthony Albanese sworn in as Australian Prime Minister ahead of a Tokyo summit.
Good evening and welcome. Hong Kong reported 190 new COVID-19 infections. Today included 28 imported cases.
Meanwhile, 2 more new infections are suspected to be linked to a McDonald's restaurant in Taikushing. Christy Khan reports.
2 more people who visited a McDonald's restaurant in Taikushing have come down with the coronavirus. One is a 67-year-old man who lives in Po Yang Mansion in Taikushing, while the other is a 76-year-old woman who resides in Richland Gardens in Kowloon Bay. The woman tested positive during a lockdown of her residential building last Thursday, while 2 of her family members tested positive with RAT tests a day earlier. A couple carrying the Omicron BA.2 subvariant who returned from the U.S. also dined at the restaurant at around the same time as them. Health officials said a total of 5 patrons who had visited the eatery have been infected so far, and they will inspect the premises accordingly.
Now we know that those patrons were seated at a round table. Well, some said that the table was close to the entrance. Some said that the table was close to the food pickup counter. So we have to look clearly at the seating and also the hygiene analysis.
Furthermore, local schools reported an additional 21 COVID cases involving 19 students and 2 staff members. Health authorities today also discussed the overseas monkeypox outbreak, noting that anyone who comes down with the disease in the city would be required to undergo an isolation period.
We believe that isolation will be needed because it is infectious. For length of isolation, well, that depends on the duration of incubation period, and 21 days will be quite normal.
The authorities added they will send out letters to all private doctors asking them to keep an eye on the situation and report any suspected monkeypox cases. Christy Khan, TVB News.
Government Health Advisor Lau Yulong is expecting a 6th wave of COVID infections in the city by the end of the year. He says it's important for senior citizens to receive at least 3 doses of COVID-19 vaccines, preferably 4 to acquire enough protection.
But for healthy adults, he says 3 jabs will provide adequate protection. Caleb Leung has details.
First spotted in South Africa last year, the Omicron variant of COVID-19 has since quickly spread to other parts of the world. A key infection source of Hong Kong's 5th wave of the epidemic was a female patient who arrived from Pakistan. The virus was spread inside a quarantine hotel she stayed in and eventually entered the community. With the 5th wave now stabilized, Lau Yulong, chairman of the Scientific Committee on Vaccine Preventable Diseases, believes the 6th wave will spread to Hong Kong just like the 5th one. He explained that with billions of people in some countries still unvaccinated, if some of them get infected with a new variant, the mutant strain will again spread to Europe and Asia. Lau believes this may occur at the end of this year. The health expert also said if there's a new wave in Hong Kong, the city should focus on preventing serious cases and deaths. He stressed the need to have senior citizens getting 3 COVID jabs to avoid having a high number of elderly adults succumbing to the coronavirus or in need of hospitalization, just like during the 5th wave. Lau said 3 COVID shots can already provide adequate protection, so there's no need for healthy adults aged between 18 and 59 to take the 4th jab. Caleb Leung, TVB News.
The mainland has reported 802 new domestic COVID infections. Some 550 of them are in Shanghai. Some rail lines in Shanghai opened yesterday after a lengthy closure due to the outbreak. Mainland media outlets reported that a rail company in Shanghai had moved more than 10,000 passengers in one day. Most of them were leaving the city. In Guangzhou, passengers arriving from Shanghai via high-speed rail will be sent to designated quarantine facilities for 7 days. They will have to undergo an additional week of self-monitoring as well.
The head of the World Health Organization warned that the pandemic is most certainly not over during the body's annual meeting in Geneva.
That is despite global infection rates appearing to stabilize since the peak of the Omicron outbreak. Daniel Rao reports.
Officials gathered in Geneva for the 75th World Health Organization Assembly. The summit will end on May 28th, having got underway on Sunday. It is the first non-virtual edition of the WHO's annual gathering since the pandemic began. There were strong words from Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, who warned against complacency in the global fight against COVID-19.
We lower our guard at our peril. Increasing transmission means more deaths, especially among unvaccinated, and more risk of a new variant emerging. Declining testing and sequencing means we're blinding ourselves to the evolution of the virus. And almost 1 billion people in lower income countries remain unvaccinated.
Ghebreyesus called for limited vaccine distribution in developing countries compared to their richer counterparts to be addressed. He said while the world's overall vaccine supply has improved, there is insufficient political commitment to roll out jabs in some regions. That's in addition to problems with operational or financial capacity in others. The WHO's latest weekly report showed despite the fact that global infection and death rates appear to be stabilizing, 60% of the world's population has yet to be vaccinated. Furthermore, COVID death rates are rising in Africa, the continent with the lowest inoculation rate worldwide. Ghebreyesus, who is expected to win a second 5-year term as the head of the WHO, also criticized the role of misinformation in encouraging vaccine hesitancy. He also discussed the ongoing threats posed by diseases such as Ebola and monkeypox. Meanwhile, the United Nations Secretary General called for the WHO to be given greater funding to help prevent further health crises.
WHO needs global support and investment. Sustainable funding is one of the top issues being discussed at this year's assembly. There is no greater return on investment than health, for people, for economies and jobs, for peace and security, for our planet. Health is hope.
Among the other topics of discussion was Ukraine's public health crisis brought on by Russia's invasion of the country. In a video address to the summit, French President Emmanuel Macron slammed Moscow's military for targeting healthcare facilities in Ukraine. Daniel Rao, TVB News.
A dozen Indo-Pacific countries are set to join a sweeping new trade pact that will help the United States work more closely with Asian economies on issues like supply chains, digital trade, clean energy, and anti-corruption efforts.
During the announcement in Japan today, U.S. President Joe Biden also had a stern warning for Beijing on Taiwan. The launch of the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, also known as IPEF, has been billed by the White House as one of the bigger moments of Joe Biden's 5-day visit to South Korea and Japan. Speaking alongside Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, Biden said the economic engagement strategy will represent 40% of world GDP.
This framework is a commitment to working with our close friends and partners in the region on challenges that matter most to ensuring economic competitiveness in the 21st century, by improving security and trust in the digital economy, protecting workers, strengthening supply chains, and tackling corruption that robs nations of their ability to serve their citizens.
The IPEF is a bid to salvage some part of the benefits of participation in a broader trade agreement like the one former President Donald Trump quit. Taiwan has been left out, but Washington is looking to deepen economic ties with the island. At today's news conference, Biden answered yes when asked if the U.S. would be willing to get involved militarily to defend Taiwan.
Look, here's the situation. We agree with a one China policy. We signed on to it and all the attendant agreements made from there. But the idea that it can be taken by force just taken by force is just not appropriate. It will dislocate the entire region and be another action similar to what happened in Ukraine.
The foreign ministry in Beijing expressed strong dissatisfaction and resolute opposition to Biden's remarks. Spokesperson Wang Wenbin said China has no room for compromise or concessions on issues involving core interests. Earlier, Biden was given a state welcome to Japan, including a military honor guard. Biden also met Emperor Naruhito at the palace. The U.S. president offered greetings on behalf of the American people, highlighting the strength of the U.S.-Japan relationship. Biden is also set to meet with the leaders of Japan, India, and Australia in the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue Group. Australia's new Labor government is hitting the ground running. Speaking ahead of a visit to Japan to meet with world leaders, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese pledged more focus on relations with Southeast Asia and climate change as Australia navigates ties with a more assertive China.
There's a new government in Australia, and it's a government that represents a change in terms of the way that we deal with the world on issues like climate change, but also a continuity in the way that we have respect for democracy and the way that we value our friendships and long-term alliances. The relationship with China will remain a difficult one. I said that before the election. That has not changed. It is China that has changed, not Australia, and Australia should always stand up for our values, and we will in a government that I lead.
The speech came shortly after Albanese and several cabinet members were sworn in at a ceremony in Canberra. He said his country's alliance with the U.S. is our most important, along with our relationships in the region. U.S. President Joe Biden called Albanese to congratulate him on his win and wished to make the country's alliance stronger.
In Thailand, a former transport minister ousted by a 2014 military coup won Bangkok's first governor election in 9 years on Sunday. Observers see it as a sign of the waning popularity of Prime Minister Prayuth Chan-o-cha. The 55-year-old independent candidate, Chad-Chart Sitipunt, won the election by a record 1.3 million votes. His nearest rivals both captured about 250,000 votes. The poll is the first governor race since 2013. 31 candidates sought to win the support of the capital's 4.4 million eligible voters, including 700,000 first-time voters. Bangkok is the only province in Thailand to elect its own governor every 4 years since 1985. But the process was suspended when former military junta leader Prayuth came to power in the coup. In 2019, Prayuth won a general election that critics say was flawed. Chad-Chart was among the prime minister candidates for the opposition Pheu Thai Party in the same election. He said his victory on Sunday showed the power of the democratic process and vowed to heal political differences.
Still ahead on tonight's news, Russia steps up attacks on the Donbas region in Ukraine. In Afghanistan, the Taliban begins enforcing an order for female TV anchors to cover their faces. And a fatal shooting incident on the New York subway. Welcome back to TVB News. Russia has stepped up its pounding of the Donbas and Mykolaiv regions with airstrikes and artillery fire.
This as the Polish president, speaking to Ukrainian lawmakers in Kyiv, warned that any further losses of Ukraine territory would be, as he put it, a huge blow to the West. Matthew Bray reports.
The Russian Defense Ministry at a daily briefing again said it was striking the Donbass and Mykolaiv regions, showing unspecified aerial views of explosions. In further handouts from the RDM, video purports to show Ka-52 attack helicopters firing on Ukraine positions, well, somewhere in Ukraine. Russian tanks were seen driving through the Donbass, sporting the symbols heavily associated with the Russian military since its invasion began on February the 24th. Ukraine says Russia is trying to break through at Severodonetsk and Lysychansk with heavy shelling. In an also imprecise Donbass location, Ukraine troops are dug in a forested area. They have tanks under nets and Javelin anti-tank weapons. But one of the soldiers said they lacked armoured vehicles as well as air defence and aviation. Poland's President Andrzej Duda addressed the Ukraine Parliament Sunday. He said the West faced a test of credibility over how strongly it would back Kyiv and criticised those who suggested Ukraine should yield to Russian demands. His counterpart, Volodymyr Zelensky, gave an impassioned speech exalting the most staunch foreign supporter of Ukraine. Poland has taken 3 million Ukrainian refugees, granting them the right to live and work and claim social security payments. The wife of Zelensky has been speaking to national broadcaster ICTV. In the interview, Olena Zelenska said she had hardly seen her husband since the start of the Russian invasion, and they would often have dinner conversations by phone. She added she was waiting for the day when it would be over. In central Kyiv, a new exhibition was attracting visitors, burnt-out Russian tanks. One serviceman said, "It must be shown we are destroying the enemy and that we will liberate Ukraine." Matthew Bray, TVB News.
A 48-year-old man was shot and killed on the New York subway on Sunday, the latest attack of a series on the transit system. The man was identified as Daniel Enriquez of Brooklyn. He was traveling on a Q train over the Manhattan Bridge at around 11:40 a.m. The gunman was pacing the last car of the train and shot the man at close range without provocation. The gunman fled after the train pulled into the Canal Street station in Manhattan. Last month, a man opened fire on a crowded train in Brooklyn, injuring 10 people. And in January, a man apparently suffering from schizophrenia pushed a woman in front of a train, also in New York. In Afghanistan, the Taliban has begun enforcing an order requiring all female TV news anchors to cover their faces while on air. The move is part of a hardline shift that has drawn condemnation from rights activists. The order was announced last Thursday, and only a handful of news outlets complied with it. However, on Sunday, most female anchors were seen with their faces covered. This after the Taliban began enforcing the decree. Showing solidarity with their female colleagues, the TV channel's male personnel covered their faces with masks, including the main evening news reader. During the Taliban's last time in power, from 1996 to 2001, they imposed overwhelming restrictions on women. After the fundamentalist group seized power again in August, it initially appeared to have moderated their restrictions. But earlier this month, it ordered all women in public to wear head-to-toe clothing that leaves only their eyes visible.
Back here at home, the airport authorities said the third runway at Hong Kong International Airport will open this year, but the entire runway project won't be completed until 2024. In a legislative council meeting today, the airport authorities said the middle runway will be closed for reconfiguration. In addition, the AA said travelers will have to pay for the construction fees of the runway project until the debts in relation to the project are paid off.
During the past 2 years, because of the construction of the third runway, our financial position has dealt a very severe blow to us because of the epidemic. On the basis of the current position, we will have to charge it until 2033-34.
The Law Society is looking into an allegation by the National Security Department of the police that a number of solicitors have committed professional misconduct. The Professional Association said the police made the complaint after looking into a case linked to the now defunct 612 Humanitarian Relief Fund.
The Law Society has received the complaint from police. We have already initiated investigations into the allegations in accordance with the complaints and discipline mechanisms set out in the Law Society's Guide to Professional Conduct. As all investigations into professional misconduct are confidential, the Law Society cannot disclose any details.
That's the news. Have a great week ahead.
Bye for now.